I really wanted to channel my inner Freddie Mercury, but I just didn't think I could quite pull it off. So, We Are the Champions is a great theme song, I think, for this conference, because you all are champions in what you do. And if you really want to be a champion in your market, then we really need to take the organizations to the next level. We need to optimize our business. And we've talked a lot about optimization so far this week, or the last 2 days. And to me, optimization can be a complex thing to do and to do well. But equally challenging is to diagnose where to start. Where do you begin the optimization journey? And I think sometimes we overlook that, and it makes the process a little bit harder. But what if there was a way that we could simplify how to identify opportunities for operational improvement? If we could find a way that would focus on the essential elements that drive efficient delivery, and then we could quantify opinions and feelings and turn them into some kind of measurable data that would help us identify performance gaps and help us target where do we need to go improve our business. And I think that's very important, that we have to identify the targets before we can start to solve the problems. Diagnose before you treat. And I think the tendency is typically to focus on how do we optimize, how do we solve the problem, before we ever talk about what do we optimize. And so what happens at the end of the day, a lot of organizations either fail miserably at it, or they just don't do it because it's hard. And so we want to talk a little bit about that today. Where to start? How do we start? And I think starting in the right place is critical. Otherwise, we get what I call whack-a-mole optimization. And you know what that is, right? We have a thing over here, we go put a team on it, we beat it down, and we solve the problem. Oh, there's one over here, we run over here, and we beat it down, and we solve the problem. Oh, then there's one over here, and we beat it down, and we try to solve the problem. But the real problem is we fix the fires that are burning, but we never truly fix our foundation. We're always chasing optimization, but we never get to a point that we can kind of get ahead of it. So what if we had an approach that we could align all levels of management on what's important for the organization? We could set clear direction for improving our operating model, strengthen execution, and ensure that we have efficient delivery to our clients every step of the way. I think you would agree that would be a home run, and that would be truly a game changer, right? Okay, so half of you are sitting there says, that sounds really good. The other half of you are sitting there saying, optimization, I don't really care about optimization, right? Has anybody in here tried to reduce cost in your organization? Yeah, okay. Have you tried to increase productivity on your team? Yep. How about enhancing customer satisfaction? We don't care about our customers, but how about enhancing customer satisfaction? Yeah, everybody's tried to do that, right? What about positioning yourself to handle market changes or building scale so you can grow seamlessly, you can scale for growth? Anybody who's doing that? Yeah, all of that's optimization, whether you realize it or not. It's a buzzword. It's not new. It's been around forever. We've talked about it a lot in the conference. When I started in the industry way long time ago, we called it value analysis, re-engineering, Six Sigma. Now I've got some horror memories of Six Sigma. Lean Six Sigma, which is a vast improvement. But those are tools and methodologies that we use to optimize our business. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations get distracted by the tool and they forget what the goal is, which is optimization. So they focus on we're lean, or we're Six Sigma, or we're re-engineering our processes. So we need to not focus on the tool as much as the outcome. That make sense? And so I think of optimization, and I'm pretty passionate about optimization, and I don't think optimization is a tool or a methodology. It's a journey, and Simon said that. It's really a journey, and it's a never-ending journey. And I also think it's as much about culture as it is about efficiency. I think an optimized organization has a culture that is committed to standardization and documentation. It's action-oriented, where we have defined objectives and very trackable results. It's aligned, where we have agreement on what's important and everybody is pulling in the same direction all the time. It's focused on execution, that goes without saying, and it holds people accountable at every level in the organization. All right, so you sitting there and says, yeah, that sounds really good. That's kind of broad. If your boss had come to you and said, hey, I need you to optimize new business, you're sitting there thinking, I've got to go make this process efficient. Well, we just kind of blew that out a little bit, right? Now it's going to be a little bit broader, and you may say, wow, how do I do that? I think it helps to take optimization, and I break it down into 4 phases. And I think we have to understand those phases, and we have to achieve those phases in order to truly optimize our business. The first phase are the essentials, understanding what we do, how we do it, and what it should cost. If we don't know our processes and we don't know our pricing allowable, how do we know if we're operating within boundaries? How do we know that we're delivering what our customers expect? Once we know that, the second phase is effectiveness. We have to be able to consistently deliver on that promise to the customer, time and time again. As my organization or my process starts to mature, I start to come into the phase of efficiency. And that's where we really start to see technology stabilize, processes mature, my staff gets more knowledgeable, I start to see cross-functionality, we start to take those repetitive, high-volume tasks and outsource them to ReSource Pro so that we're better stewards of our resources, we're more efficient, we're doing things better, faster, cheaper. And then and only then do we reach that final phase of optimizations, which what I call the excellence phase. And that's when we have optimization embedded in our organization. It becomes part of our DNA. We've talked about integrate, optimize, and digitize. This is when we were able to start to digitize everything. If we don't have solid foundations, solid processes, standard things that we do, digitization only, as Simon said, it makes us fail faster. So we have to do all of these things in the right order, and we need to make sure that we accomplish all 4 phases of optimization. So when we talk about integrate, optimize, digitize, the first two phases of this I consider to be foundational. Before I can integrate, I have to know what we do, how we do it, and we have to effectively do it time and time again. The second 2, I say they're aspirational, and that's where we get into the optimization and the digitization. Okay? This is the foundation of the framework that we put together that helps us try to identify our optimization opportunities. I think when you talk about optimization, you have to think of it in terms of operational focus, with key dimensions of strategy, process, execution, infrastructure, and sustainability. Each segment builds on the previous segment, and at the end of the day, we align our strategy, we define our objectives, we standardize our processes, we create a consistent language for the organization, and it's foundational. We have to have a solid foundation, or we can't be flexible to ebb and flow with changes in our industry. And we also establish clear accountabilities at every level of the game. These are the dimensions that we will build the assessment around, okay? Combine the 4 phases of optimization with those dimensions, and we come up with these areas of operational readiness. This gives us the basis for our assessment, and typically what we do is identify 3 to 4 criteria with each dimension. So for instance, if you look at the process box, if we just said, let's go assess our processes, that's kind of a broad topic. But when I look at process, I want to make sure that we have systematic processes. I want to make sure that we have dedicated, standardized processes and tools. I want to make sure that we have well-defined roles and responsibilities, and that we have clear ownership of the function. So when we talk about the operational readiness, we want to make sure that we understand enough of the components to break down where we might have gaps. And this is the basis kind of our assessment that we would do at the end of the day. I think a survey is a great way to get this. A survey is a great way to get this done quickly. But remember, at this point, we are not looking for solutions. We are trying to look for where to start. We build a survey around those dimensions and those criteria, and then we have to score the responses. And so the way we break this out, there are 5 levels of maturity when we look at optimization. The first level, non-existent. Pretty clear, right? Inconsistency is the thing. We don't have standard processes. Every day is a new day, and everything is unique and very unstructured. The second phase of maturity is reactive, and it's exactly what it sounds like. We're constantly reacting to things around us, and we're constantly trying to figure out what's coming next. Most organizations kind of live in the functioning level of operational maturity, which is where we have processes, we have some standardization, we're fairly proactive in what we do, but we're just not clicking on all cylinders. Then we get into the integrated phase, and again, we talk about integration, optimization, digitization. Once I start to get a little bit more mature, now when I get to this integrated phase, I'm kind of a well-oiled machine. I'm operating on all cylinders, I'm clicking along, and everything is pretty good, pretty predictable, not a lot of uncertainty and a lot of disruption. The ultimate phase is the optimized phase, right? And this is where we have a culture of continuous improvement, capacity management processes in place, performance metrics, dashboards, digitization. And again, I can't get to that phase until I have integrated and optimized. I can't digitize and leverage technology to its fullest effect until I have standard processes, standard criteria. And so that's how we determine our maturity index whenever we do these assessments. Make sense? The other thing, we do it, so in life, you conduct an assessment, you identify gaps, you identify kind of where we are kind of in the stage of things, and we define recommendations, solutions, and we create presentations. Everybody in here has done presentations, presented them to leadership. What happens at the end of the day when you finish that presentation? They take a PowerPoint, it was nice, it's pretty, and they go back and they lay it on the corner of their desk. And over time, things get put on top of it, and then they move it to their cadenza, and ultimately, it gets thrown away. So great ideas, we get some incremental improvements out of it. What I have found is developing a comprehensive roadmap to guide the optimization journey is a game changer. It allows me to prioritize and sequence recommendations. I can illustrate dependencies. And for some reason, I find there's magic in the roadmap. It helps us maintain focus. We don't lose sight of the work that we haven't gotten to yet. And it seems to live on the executive's desk. I don't know why, I can't explain it, but for some reason that gives them something that they don't typically bury under stacks of stuff. So I think a roadmap is very critical when you're looking at optimization because it gives you the path forward. So what I want to do is to do a quick case study, and I thought this was going to be a longer session and we would do some tabletop stuff, and I want you to look at some stuff on your table and kind of help. On your table there's a handout. It's got 5 questions on one side. On the other side it has the operational readiness graph that I had up a minute ago. And I want you to help me be the management team for Acme Insurance Company and do the survey. But before we do that, I want to give you a little discussion about the survey, right? So a typical survey structure that I talked about, we would have the 5 dimensions, 3 or 4 criteria for each dimension. So the survey would be 15 to 20 questions. Not excessively demanding, fairly easy to complete, and can be completed in 15, 20, 30 minutes. I promise you, if you start to do this in your organization, the tendency is going to be to add to those questions. They're going to want to make it long. They're going to make it very involved. I have seen organizations try to turn this thing into a 100-question survey. It takes 4 hours to complete. You have to have a whole staff of people to help you complete it. Because what happens is we get in our mind, I have a solution. And I think if I can ask enough questions, you're going to take that solution, and I'm trying to put my solution in place before I've ever diagnosed the problem. So if all of a sudden you're getting ready to do this and you're building out the questions and it gets to be more than 20 questions, stop, because you're going to lose what you're trying to accomplish here. The second thing you'll notice is there's not a 1 to 5 score. I had the 5 levels of maturity. I don't have a rating scale of 1 to 5. I have responses that you pick the best one. Why do I do that? If I said rate this on a scale of 1 to 5, and you didn't know what the question really meant, which number are you putting on the survey? 3. You're going to pick in the middle because I don't know. Or if I had a boss one time that said nobody's at 5, you could be an A+++++ employee and you got a 4. Had another boss, if you smiled at him in the parking lot in the morning, oh, you're a 5. So this takes that uncertainty or tries to narrow that uncertainty a little bit, right? The response forces a little bit deeper level of evaluation. And so what I always tell people is pick the one that feels closest or feels most like your organization. So what I would like to do is you guys are the management team for Acme Insurance Company, and I'd like for you to do just we don't have a lot of time, but for a minute or two, I'm going to give you the background of the company and then take a stab at reading those 5 questions and picking the response that you think is most true for that organization. We're at MGA, we're a sales organization, and this is actually a real client. Not here, but a real client. They've been focused on growing their business. For the last 5 years, they've had 30% sales growth year over year. They can sell anything, man. They are phenomenal. But they had no operational objectives. Their processes are manually intensive and very non-standard, but they celebrate that. They say, look, everybody that does business with us, you're unique. We create a custom solution just for you. So everything was an exception. I'm sure nobody in here has that in their organization today. Cycle times were long, and they really couldn't even track cycle times because that was a concept that was foreign to them. They didn't have good data, so they were unable to track cycle time. They had no way of determining what workloads, how many people it took to get the work done. Sales volume was the only metric published in that organization was sales volume. Processing staff growth has outpaced sales, so they've been growing 30% a year in sales. Their processing staff have been growing 35, 40% a year, just trying to stay ahead of the volume that was coming in. Obviously, they had high turnover because they had all these new people coming in, no standard processes. How do you train people? A lot of frustration. People would kind of run through the door pretty quickly. Technology was homegrown, very cumbersome, very difficult to work with, and they had no business reviews. The executives would sit in the C-suite, talk about how great they were, and then the finance person would go talk to finance, the operations person talk to operations, the salesperson talk to sales, and nobody tried to coordinate and align what you would be working on. So take just a real quick minute, take a look at that survey, and see how you would answer the questions of the really 5 quick questions. And at one point, the original plan was we're going to do this, I was going to score it and whatnot, but we're going to do a real quick informal scoring here in just a second. And there are no wrong, well, there could be a wrong answer, but there are no wrong answers. While you're doing that, I'm going to keep talking a little bit about this, and we're going to try to do a quick informal survey with you guys on this, just in the interest of time. If between trying to do that, and you can look at the screen here, if you were the CEO or COO of your company, and we did one of these surveys, and this was the dimensional results that showed up. So the red in the middle is kind of where they scored, so you can kind of see where the gaps are. If you were the CEO or COO trying to say, okay, where do we need to go focus first? What would be the area of most concern? Somebody said process? Right, because that's my biggest gap. So that's what this kind of tells us. But now, if I only had the 5 questions, I'd go dig into process. If I had the 15 to 20 questions, now I got a little bit better, a little bit different picture. So if I look at this, I might say, okay, it's pretty clear where my problems are. It's pretty clear where my gaps are. And quickly I would say, I've got systematic processes. I have standardized processes. Our roles are very poorly defined. Let's go do a project to define roles and responsibilities. Oh, and by the way, we don't have a good way of determining staffing, so that's probably impacting some of my role confusion. So I'm going to try to develop some capacity modeling capabilities to better predict staff need, and I'm going to work on roles before I try to do anything else. So I want my foundation to be complete. If I was trying to drive this as an organization, I kind of want to have my color in the middle as consistent as possible, right? You don't want to have big gaps in it. Does that make sense? All right, so real quickly, on the survey, the first question is around strategy. How many of you would pick the first bullet point on there that they lack formal vision and formal strategy? Okay, how many would pick the second one, that they might have a vision but it's not really communicated? Okay, anybody pick that they had an established vision, the third bullet? Okay, 1. How about the fourth bullet? And I'm guessing nobody, how about the 5th bullet, that they really have a good, clear vision? All right. Second one's around the process. No formal support for processes are the first bullet. The second bullet. Third bullet, they had mixed or limited support for processes, okay? Anybody have the fourth where they kind of are getting better and fifth where they're really optimized? Right. How about execution? No targets linked to day-to-day operations. No formal targets tied to day-to-day performance, but they're aware of them. Some linked operational targets. Anybody 3, 4, 5? Okay. And then right people, skills from an infrastructure perspective, no formal reports or staffing parameters. Yep. Service standards, backlogs. Overtime's assigned based on amount of backlogs. Staff can see the work volumes, know what to do. So really the first 2 bullet points, okay, perfect. And then the sustainability side, no formal business reviews. Yep. Informal, inconsistent reviews. Anybody have the third, fourth, fifth? Okay. So you see what we're trying to get to by asking the questions with responses. It forces you to have a little bit more detail into reality. So at the end of the day, we did this, and this is where the organization scored. You can see that they were really pretty poorly optimized. They were at a 1.6 level of optimization, so they were non-reactive, and they were 34% optimized. So we put together the report, put together the roadmap, and said, okay, let's do something about this. The CEO said, let's go fix this organization. So we worked to establish strategy and objectives for ops and sales. We documented processes. We created operating metrics they had never had before, built some staffing models to help them determine their need, started improving technology, and started having quarterly business reviews with the broader management team so they could understand what was going on. On the 13th month after we started, we did the exact same survey, same audience, and they doubled their optimization readiness, which was pretty powerful. But they start, as you can see, they start to build out, their circle gets bigger, their foundation's getting stronger. The CEO said, boy, this is awesome. Where's that roadmap you had? Let's take that roadmap and now let's go look at what's next on the list. So then we started doing linked performance objectives, streamlined, put automated workflow in, really increased the technology platform, digitized a lot of their business, had individual scorecards for performance that they could see on a monthly basis how they're doing. They started using the staffing models to do capacity planning on a daily, weekly basis. They got all new technology, and those quarterly business reviews started working so well, they said, let's do some monthly reviews with the management team. And on the 26th month after we started, we did the same survey, and boom, they were almost completely optimized. So the key here is you see the progress, you follow it, but the key is to fix the foundation before you start to optimize. If you want to digitize before you standardize, you're not going to get this result. So I kind of say this is what I call simply effective. It works every time it's been tried. Develop the assessment, get your gap, identify what needs to be done, then determine your solution and your recommendations to fix things. Put it in a roadmap, execute on that roadmap, and continually follow up, continually assess where you are in the process. It's going to give you a consistent language and enterprise-wide accountability. So again, to take the integrate, optimize, and digitize, I think you have to define, standardize, integrate, optimize, digitize, and then you'll hit that level of excellence from an operational maturity or from an optimization standpoint. Again, at this point, we're trying to diagnose, not solve. I talked about the presentation being put on the desk. Another pet peeve of mine is when you're presenting the findings of these studies, I like to present things that are clear and relevant. Overly detailed reports like a Harvard Business Review. Anybody read Harvard Business Review cases? Seen them? They're very complex. People want to make the presentation really fancy, really complex because it makes us look smart. And what I find is I could take a Harvard Business Review, and I like Harvard Business Review cases. I'm a nerd. I kind of geek out on process. But if you gave that to most executive teams, they could read it, they might understand it. They may not know how to apply it. But if I gave it to the frontline staff, management staff, they don't have the experience. They'll look at this and think, it's Greek. So I like to have a report that is relevant to the business, that is easy to read and understand, directionally informative, and actionable. And I realized this early in my career. I worked for a company that constantly used one of those top-tier consulting firms that hired all of the best and brightest MBAs from the best and brightest MBA schools. They came in to do an expense reduction study project, brought 17 MBAs right out of college into the organization, did workshops, did recommendations. They put together the most impressive presentation, graphs, big words. And at the end of the day, I noticed what happened. Incremental improvement, because everybody was aware of expenses. That report went on the desk, went on the credenza, went in the garbage can. And none of the recommendations were ever implemented. Several years later, we had been on an acquisition bin, bought 4 or 5 companies, and after we stabilized distribution, we decided we need to get the back office in shape. Probably a familiar topic for some of you folks right now. So instead of hiring that top-tier consulting firm, we brought in a boutique firm who specialized in the insurance industry. And instead of bringing in 17 MBAs with no experience, they brought in 2 people that had been there, done that, run organizations, turned things around. We did the same workshops, had the same recommendations, but their presentation was simple, action-oriented. It was like, here's what you need to do, here's how you need to go do it. And the results were tremendous. They implemented the recommendations, the people understood it, they bought into it, and it transformed that organization in ways that the big fancy stuff did not do. And so to me, I think that underscores the importance of delivering consumable reports that you can do something with. And remember, all we're talking about right now is just diagnosing where to start optimization. We're not trying to solve the optimization need. So if you're getting ready to optimize something and you haven't gone through those foundational components of making sure I have the essentials in place, that I'm effectively delivering, and I have consistent documented processes that are standardized, anything beyond that is going to be probably a struggle to truly optimize your business. So with that, I don't know if we take questions. I think we have a minute or 2 left. Does anybody have a question? If not, if you want to talk about, I could go deep on this, so if you want to talk about this, catch me in a brag, catch me tonight, or call me, because I could go hours talking about optimization. But we do have a minute left, so I think we will have a question. Hi.
First, thank you for the therapy session. Thank you for the therapy session. This is perfect. I wanted to ask you about the case today. Did they come to you asking for help, or how that happened?
They did come to us asking for help because the CEO knew me from a previous life, and he said, I just started working in this organization, and we're horrible. And he goes, I don't know where to start. So he said, can you come run your playbook? So we had a whole bunch of things with process and everything else. And I said, before we do that, let's get a lay of the land. And so we did the survey. And his first response was, no, that's too simple. That's too high level. He wanted to drill in, put all the questions. I said, nope, start here. We did the survey, and it quickly told us these are the big, they had big gaps everywhere. And so then that then gave us the roadmap to kind of go from there. He also had an IT background, so roadmaps were pretty comfortable. He was comfortable with that. Yeah. But the leaders in the organization, they were able to consume that in a way that they couldn't just if you put it in a report with recommendations.
So they were already open to go through this process. How do you work with a company that maybe is not ready in their mindset? Well, I'm asking for a friend. I mean,
the CEO was open to doing it. The organization was absolutely resistant. Okay. And so the way that we approached that was we had a very participative consulting style, right? So rather than sitting there with the SMEs or the executives in a room and say, what should it look like? We got the frontline staff together, and we actually led them to the right answers, or they actually came up with good answers. But then whenever they started to see the recommendations, it wasn't like, well, that was Steve's recommendation. It was like, hey, that was my idea. Oh, look, they put this, I came up with that. So we tried to make all the stuff they did organic, what they wanted to do. And then what happened, they start waving the flags to make things happen because it was their idea, not our idea. Now,
Thank you.
Now, to be honest, a lot of them were our ideas that we helped plant, but most of it's common sense stuff, right? But it was getting the rank and file to lead the charge was the secret.
Thank you very much.
All right? Thanks, folks.